Today's Fox News Now Midday is brought to you by the Wigger Law Firm. Brought to you locally in part by CPI Security.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. Coming up today on Fox 24 News Now, May is ALS Awareness Month. We chat with a retired veteran who was diagnosed 3 years ago. We learn more about the signs, the search for a cure, and what it takes to care for someone diagnosed with this degenerative disease. That's all ahead today on Fox 24 News Now. There are as many as 30,000 people suffering from ALS in the United States. May is National ALS Awareness Month. And here to share more information about the disease and a wonderful cause is Callie Vanderbilt, Director of Development for the ALS Association SC Chapter, and Ron Ferretra, ALS patient and retired Chief Master Sergeant for the U.S. Air Force. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
And sir, thank you so much for your service.
Thank you.
Well, first, I'd like to direct my first question to you, Callie. If maybe you can give us an overall picture. The statistics that I am familiar with is about 30,000 individuals in the country right now have been diagnosed with ALS. What is ALS?
ALS is a progressive motor neuron disease. It affects the motor neurons in the brain and spinal cord, effectively killing them and rendering the patient ultimately paralyzed. They're unable to speak, feed themselves, walk. So they're really reliant on caregivers. And it's just a really tough disease to go through. The diagnosis, the lifespan is about 2 to 5 years. So it's a really devastating disease, and we've got our work cut out for us.
What is the average age that someone is diagnosed?
It really honestly can be any age. We have patients as young as in their 20s to in their 80s and 90s. So it affects all people, all colors, men and women. It really sees no boundaries.
Chief Ferretra, when were you diagnosed with ALS?
I was diagnosed back in June of 2017. The diagnosis part is very difficult because it's what they told me was it's called a rule-out disease. They try to determine what you don't have, and once they get through the end of the list, they go, oh, well, you probably have ALS.
What were some of the signs that led you to doctors in the first place?
My inability to walk correctly. I actually fell in a doctor's office and ended up the next day with an appointment with a neurologist that started the process, but my feet were drooping. So when I pick up my feet, they just kind of hang down, and now they hang down much worse. But that's really where it started for me, was in the legs, and it's slowly working its way up from my feet to my hips.
Are you able to walk now?
I am able to walk now. I can walk short distances with a cane. Any longer distance, I use a walker or a shopping cart. If I'm going to the grocery store, they make great walkers. And I have a mobility scooter that I use if we were to go on to like go visit Magnolia Gardens or something like that.
I see. So for long distances, it's pretty challenging for you. I know some.
Oh, yeah.
For quite some time, bringing awareness to ALS, Callie, everybody was doing the ice bucket challenge and things like that. Would you say that that was really what kind of brought this disease to the forefront, where people were just becoming much more educated on what this was? Did we see an increase in diagnoses because of this?
I don't know that there was an increase in diagnoses because of it, but there was definitely an increase in awareness. The Ice Bucket Challenge raised $17 million for the ALS Association, and the majority of that went to funding research. So Right now, there is no known cure or treatments to stop the progression of the disease. However, that money raised from the Ice Bucket Challenge identified 5 new gene markers that we're now studying to see if we can't see, what starts this disease. So definitely awareness was brought on by that campaign.
Certainly was. I know that you're doing a walk, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit, but are we still engaging in these Ice Bucket Challenges? Is this still something that people can individually do on their own and then pay it forward, have the next person do it, and continue to raise money that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that we can do to continue awareness and raising funds for research and for patient care, we're all about. It kind of saw its breath in 2014, but we would love to see a resurgence for sure.
Absolutely. Well, we do need to take a break, but when we come back, I want to talk about the more local efforts that have been made to bring awareness to ALS. I have a few more questions for you, Chief, as well. So do stick with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've been chatting with Callie Vanderbilt, Director of Development for the ALS Association SC Chapter, and Ron Ferretra, ALS patient and retired Chief Master Sergeant for the U.S. Air Force. And Chief Ferretra, when you were diagnosed in 2017, did it come as a complete shock to be diagnosed with ALS?
Well, the process to get diagnosed, it didn't come to a complete shock because the process takes about a year to get diagnosed if it's in a patient that's moving slow, like mine is moving slow. So it takes a very long time. And that's probably the most frustrating part is trying to find out, what do I really have?
So we know that there is no cure. So what are you doing to treat the ALS today?
I stay very active. I had a friend whose mother died from ALS, and she recommended after I retired to start water aerobics, which I really got into. Up until the pandemic, I was doing 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday. After the pandemic, I started riding a bike and working on a recumbent trainer. The pool opened Monday again. I was at the pool when it opened. And I've gone back every day. It's a little different because we have no aerobics classes now, at least not for the foreseeable future. So you have to do your own training in the water. But I believe water's magic, and it keeps the muscle and the muscle tone more alive and active. I certainly walk better after I've been in the water than I do any other time. And in the group that I swim with, we're a very close-knit group. We text constantly. I run a daily trivia question with them. So we try to keep our mind active, and we try to stay social, and I think that's great.
Well, it sounds like it's a very strong community, Callie, and you're going to be having a walk to raise awareness and to raise money. Maybe you can tell us the details on this and what your goal is.
Yeah, absolutely. So the walk in the perfect world pre-COVID would be November 14th at James Allen County Park. Because our patients' health and safety is our top priority, there is a huge possibility that we're going to be going virtual. And so that will be a series of mini walks that folks are going to do in their neighborhoods, and we're going to do that statewide on October 31st. So we'll be making that decision in the next coming months. But like we said, we want to keep all of our patients safe and healthy. So our goal for the statewide walk is $200,000, and that's really to keep programs. We have a durable medical equipment loan program where we give patients power wheelchairs, Hoyer lifts, all the things that they need to continue doing their daily functions in their daily lives. We do support groups for all of our patients across the state. So all of that money raised for that walk will go to continuing those programs.
That's wonderful. And for anyone who wants more information on this, where shall we direct them?
They should go to scalsa.org.
Fantastic. You're also on social media, Facebook?
Yes, you can find us South Carolina Association or ALS Association South Carolina Chapter on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter.
You're everywhere. That's fantastic, Callie. I want to thank you so much. And Chief Ferretra, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. And thank you again for your service.
Thank you.
We'll be back in 2 minutes. We just heard from a retired veteran diagnosed with ALS. There is no cure, and treatment therapies can only reduce discomfort. Here with more information on research is Dr. Jerome Current, a neurologist with the Ralph H. Johnson VA Medical Center, and Dr. Kuldip Dave, Vice President of Research for the ALS Association. And I'm going to direct my first question to Dr. Dave. From what we understand, we just understand that there is no cure for ALS. This is not the kind of news that I think a lot of people who have been diagnosed with the disease wants to hear, but what leaps have been made in research so far?
Thank you for your question. We've had a lot of progress over the years understanding biologically what is this disease doing to our bodies. What's happening at the cellular level, what's happening at the protein level. And by looking at that, we get targets that we can make drugs against. And, to sort of show my enthusiasm, we have over 30 different trials currently enrolling for patients for drug treatment trials. And they are looking at to test everything from genetic therapies to stem cell therapies, to therapies that target inflammation or our immune system or antioxidant type pathways. And so the drug discovery pipeline is very robust and diverse right now. And that's really exciting for ALS patients.
How soon do you think we can see any of these therapies on the market?
Well, it depends on how the clinical trials go. There is an FDA process set up where you test a drug for safety in phase 1, you do a small efficacy type study in phase 2, and then you do a larger efficacy and safety study in phase 3. About 9 therapies are currently in phase 3. If successful, they could be on the market as soon as next year or the year after. But again, it depends on what the data shows, and we hope that they're positive.
Now, how has this impacted patients at the VA Medical Center, Dr. Current?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity for us to discuss this critically important illness, particularly for veterans. We have 3 drugs that are FDA approved for the treatment of ALS. The first is riluzole, which has been around for more than 20 years. It specifically directs glutamate hyperexcitability. We have a second drug, edaravone, that's on the board maybe in the last 2 to 3 years. It attacks oxidative stress mechanisms. Those 2 have very modest effects on the clinical course. In the case of riluzole, it is thought to extend the natural history by 2 to 3 months. In the case of the edaravone, it appears to slow the progression of ALS, but we need more data to have more definitive statements about that. We have a third drug that's called quinidine dextromethorphan. That does not affect the natural history. That's simply symptomatic treatment for what we call pseudobulbar affect, an emotional abnormality we sometimes see in patients with ALS.
I see. Is there one single factor that causes ALS, Dr. Current?
Very great, excellent question. Let me say that we have made incredible progress in the last 20 to 25 years. We take this from being a big black hole to having all kinds of insights. A lot of insights into the underlying mechanisms of nerve cell damage. The missing piece is what triggers this. The current thinking is probably even patients with sporadic ALS have a genetic predisposition that by itself does not cause ALS, but in conjunction with estimated 5 different independent molecular events wind up triggering the cascade of motor neuron cell death and ALS. So the simple answer is it's probably multiple causes and probably impacting every patient a little differently. I need to mention that about 5 to 10% of all ALS patients have a clear-cut, dominantly inherited gene defect. And there's really opportunity to direct specific and develop gene therapy specific. For example, in the case of the superoxide dismutase mutant.
Well, it is a huge comfort to hear that there are strides being made in this area of research. And Dr. Dave, as a researcher for the ALS Association, I'm sure anybody who wants updated information on what you're doing on your side, that people can go to the ALS Association's website. So we're going to provide all of that information. And doctors, I want to thank you so much for shedding light on this incredibly important cause and a disease that has been very difficult for a lot of families, I know.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. We truly appreciate this.
Thank you, doctors.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Caring for a patient with ALS takes a level of care and devotion, but can also exact an emotional toll. Joining us now is Leslie Ryan, Director of Education and Professional Development for the ALS Association. Thank you so much, Leslie, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit about what it means to care for someone with ALS as, say, opposed to someone with dementia?
Sure. So someone with ALS is losing the ability to do things day by day. It can literally change overnight as the disease progresses. And one of the challenging pieces of that is we don't know what that progression is going to look like from person to person. And so it's always something new that they're needing to learn how to overcome, a new challenge, a new skill to help their loved one with. So those challenges are extremely frustrating. Many times people that are diagnosed with ALS are diagnosed in the prime of their life. Average age is 55. So people are still working, and many times people still have children in the home or grandchildren that they help care for. And so there's a lot of other aspects of life as well that caregivers need to step in and help with, on top of helping their loved one with daily physical activities like getting dressed or taking a shower, and even toward the end of the disease, helping them scratch an itch or turn over in bed. So it can be very complex, and it is always changing, which is a big challenge.
And that's the thing, is that it can be years of seeing those changes, and it's a degenerative disease, meaning that it just gets worse with no cure and with treatments that are only reducing discomfort. The caretaker really is that safe harbor for the patient.
Yes, absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about how patients and their loved ones prepare for what's ahead? How do you prepare for what's ahead?
It's really hard. One of the biggest challenges with an ALS diagnosis is it feels like it's a death sentence. There's no aggressive treatment to pursue, like maybe with a cancer diagnosis. And there's more hope on the horizon today, which is lovely and exciting, but there's not a lot. There's not a lot of medications to try. And so it can feel very hopeless initially and hard to prepare. And then when people kind of wrap their heads around it, they realize they can find a lot of joy and meaning in all of this, and they can prepare by getting things in order, making decisions about their care that they want to do, and really having conversations with their family, and then going back to living life. And really tapping into their ALS Association local chapter is one of the best ways to prepare, because the chapter staff really meet families where they're at. So some people want the fire hose of information and they want to get it all right away. Yeah. And some people want it drop by drop. And the beauty of having someone who knows what's coming is they can deliver the information in the dose that's needed as people are ready to hear it.
Yeah, it can be very overwhelming, but some people do better. Just give it to me all right now. But that's where you come in. And speaking to your point before about drugs and therapies, we just spoke to a couple of doctors who say that there are some very promising trials out there. So we are looking up in terms of treatment for ALS, which is wonderful news and maybe not that far off from now. But it sounds like also caring for someone with ALS, as with other degenerative diseases such as dementia and Alzheimer's, is that it can be very expensive. So what are we talking about in terms of cost for care for someone with ALS?
Cost estimates go upward of $200,000 a year for someone with ALS. Much of that is determined by choices that they make, right? Some equipment that they may get, home modifications, if they need an accessible van to get around in a power wheelchair, and then paying for care. Many of those things are not covered by insurance. A lot of what's covered by insurance are the medical visits to clinic and some equipment, which is also all very important. But the caregiving at home is done by family members or private pay, which is a challenge.
I see. And finally, for anybody who wants more resources and to find help, where do they go?
Absolutely go to the ALS Association website, alsa.org, and they can also there search for their local chapter and get resources right in their own backyard.
And you're there to help educate not just the nurses and the caretakers, but the community at large. So we really appreciate the work that you do, Leslie. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
We'll be back after this.